Welcome in, everybody. First off, I want to say I'm glad they're giving Zelda a chance. It's really cool to see her step on the main stage. I played all the Zelda games for the first time last year, and it was a lot of Link, so for this to come out a year later is kind of a treat for me. But I think this begs the question, does Echoes of Wisdom echo the success that comes from all the Zelda games that came before it? Well, let's take a deep dive and let's find out. Alright, so let's talk about the art style. While it's different from most Zeldas, I didn't play Link's Awakening. I saw glimpses of it, but I never played it myself. But compared to all the 3D ones I played, ranging from Ocarina to Skyward Sword, this was the first time I really saw this chibi art style. It was very cute, it was very charming, and it maintained an energy throughout the game. It never felt annoying. And I feel like time and time again, I was impressed when I was going from region to region and seeing all the people there and the art style and all that. I think they really nailed the art for this game. I also want to note that the characters within the game were really well done, or maybe I should say like the species. For example, like the Zora looked really nice, Gorons, the Hylians. I think the Gorons though were my favorite. They just felt like they had so much character. It kind of felt like mini Yakuza characters. I might be off the mark with that one, but they looked really cool. They felt tough, but not like overly tough. But it's hard to put in words. But they looked really cool, and I enjoyed the Goron region the most. The characters were just really well done. Alright, so walk with me while we talk about exploration. It felt great, and I feel like the game did a great job maintaining this desire to flip like every stone, check every nook and cranny to see what you could find. And I think that's a staple for the Zelda games. There's always this magical feeling when you play the game and you just want to walk around and just see what there is. And not every game can capture that, but I feel like this game stayed on brand with that, and it was really well done. And I will say that initially I thought the game was going to be small just because, just the way the art style was. But the game was surprisingly big. There was a good amount of content to the game, lots of places to explore, quests, items to find. I feel like they really nailed this aspect of the game. Alright, so let's talk combat. And for this one, you might want to sit down. Combat is a large portion of the Zelda experience, in my opinion. And they tried some new innovative stuff this time around. First and foremost, I just want to talk about the accessories they added. Think about like Elden Ring or Dark Souls, whichever you played, and how they have like a ring system where you can equip an item and it like buffs a specific aspect of gameplay for you to play around with. So like, for example, there's an item where you can do a spin and it knocks enemies back. Or if you take it off, you just do the spin and nothing happens. There's an item where you can jump higher. There's items where you can breathe underwater longer, swim faster in the water, and a few other handful. And those things are great. I like that addition to the game. It'd be cool to see that added to other future versions of Zelda. I think it's a cool system to have. And it's also super exciting when you come across those type of items, because a lot of the time you get rupees, but I'll talk about that later. Moving back to combat, the way that works in this game is, because I don't want to talk about how I feel yet, I want to explain it first. The way combat works in this game is Zelda meets an NPC, his name is Tri, and through his power, you're able to defeat monsters and make echoes or replicas of existing monsters or items in the game. So what you do is, with this system, Zelda does not have a sword or any kind of like melee weapon the way Link does in his games. Instead, she has this borrowed power where she creates clones, essentially. And it's like a necromancer in a sense. So what happens is, the first few enemies are super weak, of course. You can use inanimate objects. Like I picked up a rock and just kind of smashed that sucker over a Moblin's head and got him out, and then I took the Moblin, and now I can make multiple Moblins to go fight my enemies for me and do my bidding. What that does though is that two things about this system. You can only summon the number of enemies, like Tri has like triangles on the back of his head, and there's like 1 to 2 in the back of his head, so that means you can summon 2 things or 1 thing that costs 2. And what happens is, you use these enemies or you use these echoes and you go to fight another creature, and you just kind of summon the enemy, you summon your echoes, they go fight, and if they lose, you just do it again. You just keep doing it and doing it until they win. And it makes the game a little lackluster because there's no penalty for spamming out the monsters, which I wish you kind of had to think a little bit more. I wish there was like a cooldown on it. And I wish that the monsters that you do summon had like stamina, because what happens is that you use the weaker monsters, you come across a strong one, you defeat that strong one, and now you can just use the strong one to clear everything. And it kind of makes the game a little uninspired, or maybe not uninspired, but uninteresting, because you just summon your Charizard, your level 100 Pokemon, and it just goes and just wipes everything out until you run across something stronger than it, and at which point you rinse and repeat the process where you spam units with no consequence until you defeat that monster, and then you take the stronger one, and you rinse and repeat the cycle throughout the game, and it never deviates from that. I really think a stamina system on the strong or just in general, stamina on the monster so they can't swing for days. That way they can be overran by weaker enemies would be a great addition to the game. And Zelda having a cooldown on when she can summon monsters would be good, because if you just spam and just throw out whatever you think's work and there's like a bad matchup, now your monster goes down and now Zelda's taking direct damage as a result. And I think that would really make players think carefully about what do I want to use here, you know, your timing, just your matchups and things like that. I think it would be a huge improvement to the system. But overall, for the first time of them trying this system, I'm not mad at it. I think it just really comes down to the player breaking away from the meta mindset that we've kind of indoctrinated ourselves in and trying out new units to see what's possible. I will also say that there's no synergy system, which I think could have been really well. Because it plays a lot like Pokemon in a sense, I kind of compare it to that. And even though Pokemon doesn't have direct one-to-one synergy, there are Pokemon that when you do doubles that you put out together do have some really good synergy. Another game to look at is Temtem, which I think at this point has shut down technically speaking, but in Temtem there was a synergy system where you could have like a flying type enemy out with like a lightning type enemy, and it had like some kind of synergy to where like they could do more damage or they can move faster together. I really think that this game could have benefited from that kind of system. I also want to say that this game also could have benefited from having like lean into Zelda, you know, potentially being like a magic user, caster, whatever, and having Zelda buff units to make them go faster, take more hits, maybe like use like a taunt mechanic so that she can designate this monster Echo to be like the tank to grab all the focus, and then that gives you a few seconds to set up other small sniper like units to shoot into a crowd or something. You know, there's a lot of wiggle room. I don't know what their plate looked like at Nintendo. I don't want to make excuses for them, but there's a lot of stuff they could have done with combat. But at its basis, you defeat something and you just keep spamming those things until you eventually take down the next thing, and that's kind of like what the gameplay loop is. So I think combat is okay. I'm glad they experimented with something new, but I feel like anytime they experiment with something new, they don't go all the way in on it. They just kind of like they throw it out there and just do the bare minimum. And I can say that for a lot of devs. But they want to put more into it, but they're scared it won't be well received, so they don't put forth the effort. But I don't know what their decision-making process is. I just know that combat could have been a lot more exciting than it ended up being. But still, at the minimum, I'm glad they made the effort and tried something new. Lastly, about combat, in the game, you can temporarily turn into Link. I won't explain how that process happens, but you can like turn into him, and you can use his sword, his bow, and his bombs. And it's a cool thing, but again, this is Zelda's story. So for me, it's like she's supposed to be the main character, but she's borrowing her powers from Tri to make echoes or clones. And then she's also borrowing Link's power to be able to go in and slash and shoot bows and stuff. And it's like, I kind of feel like it takes away from Zelda's character, and it kind of makes me dislike the story a little bit, because she could have had her own power and she could have became her own person instead of just kind of, you know, it still feels like a damsel in distress. Like, yeah, she's using tools, but she's using tools given to her by like her saviors in a sense. And I'm not a mega fan of that. It doesn't ruin the game for me, but it's something I can't help but notice throughout the game. When we're talking about the main character, I think it'd be a good idea to talk about the story. I feel like the story is pretty in line with all the other Zeldas that came before it. You're going on a great journey to save someone you care about. Usually it's Link saving Zelda. This time it's Zelda saving Link. And just like the other games, you go from place to place, region to region, or whatever. There's temples there, or dungeons, whatever you want to call them. And this game is no exception. They had dungeons and places to visit, bosses to fight. The bosses were well done. I won't spoil anything. They looked really cool. They were fun to fight, even though they were pretty straightforward. I think that's more of a Nintendo thing when it comes to difficulty than it is a Zelda thing, so I won't harp on that at all. But the dungeons were fun. They felt like dungeons. The puzzles were good in there. They weren't too demanding. Maybe like one puzzle part per dungeon was like, oh man, you know, scratching your brain. But for the most part, it was pretty straightforward. But overall, I still was glad that they brought it back and we got to do that. Just some other miscellaneous things I just want to quickly talk about. They had a smoothie system in here. They kind of replaced the food thing that was in Breath and Tears, all the cooking and stuff you could do, and they kind of broke it down into smoothies where you just drink a cool, cute little smoothie. I guess it's popular right now. and it kind of replaces the food system, and it's kind of watered down, or maybe more streamlined would be the best way to put it. I didn't have any complaints with it other than I wish I could make stuff like when I was on the go versus having to warp backwards and make it before I head out. But I mean, not the worst thing. I kind of like what they did with it because there was a lot of items, and this time they kind of really chopped it down. So I think the smoothie system was an improvement to the crafting. Another thing on my list of things to talk about in this game was that rupees, or the rewards, felt lackluster after a while. While the world is very fun to explore and check out, after you've explored and you do find something, on some occasions you find an accessory, which is super exciting. But most of the time when you open these crates and things like that, you're finding crafting materials like grapes, or you're finding rupees. And it's just like, man, you know, how many times can I find grapes and be excited? How many times can I find rupees and be excited? Especially if there isn't really anything for me to spend my rupees on. And like, those two things are kind of like, it's like a synergetic problem. You're finding stuff, but you don't really care about the stuff you find, and you're building money, but you have nothing to spend the money on. I think there were some opportunities there. They could have made more accessories in the game, and they could have made accessories that you could like equip and put on monsters. They could have just had cosmetics for clothing. I think that would have been exciting. I feel like in this day and age, there's so many other games to pull from when it comes to, you know, what to spend points on in a game, you know, that they could easily borrow from those other games. But they just give you rupees and golden eggs and grapes, crafting materials. And it's like after a certain point, you don't really need all that stuff. And it's just kind of, it feels a little disappointing when you go explore a dungeon, defeat a boss, open a box, and it's like 2 golden eggs. I mean, yeah, they have a good use, but you don't really need to. You have a bed that you can sleep in to get all your hearts back, which kind of also takes away from the difficulty of the game. Overall, I did really enjoy the game. I like that they're trying new stuff out. I hope they somehow get my feedback, and if they decide to go this route again with the echoes, that they really expand on that system. I also feel like it's cool that Zelda's on the main stage, but give her own tools, her own source of power to draw from. I don't like that she had to rely on Link, and I don't like that she had to rely on Tri for the echoes. If they could have just like wrote Tri in as an assistant, and she found the staff, and you know, she was the chosen one for the staff, and she's the only one who could use it the same way Link with the sword, you know, like that. I think if it had been written differently, then I would be okay with it. I think the ability itself is cool. I don't like that it's like something she's borrowing from someone else. So give her own 2 feet to stand on. I feel like this is your traditional Zelda experience where you're going on a journey, tons of exploring, you meet people, side quests, all that good stuff. I feel like it checks off that those boxes, and I do feel like this game does echo all the success and a lot of great mechanics and qualities that came from previous games. I kind of think they still need to innovate a little bit more, but overall, I'm going to give it this 7 cans of Red 40 out of 10. If you know, you know. If you don't, feel free to ask. But make sure to hit that like button for your boy. Comment what you think about the game. I'd love to hear your questions or feedback on the video and the game itself. And sub if you want more gaming reviews, gaming content, yapping, all that good stuff. It would help a ton. And y'all stay safe out there. Peace.